being able to calculate the pathways. According to some accounts, all time travelers passed through the vortex, often using space-time machines UFOs. The vortex was hinted at existing outside of time and the universe itself. Time and the vortex were not the same. Often being in the vortex was compared to being outside of time, where travelers were neither connected to nor separated from time. What is matter? Matter is any substance that has mass and takes up space by having volume. Matter is material substance that constitutes the observable universe and, together with energy, forms the basis of all objective phenomena. What is light? Light or visible light is electromagnetic radiation within the portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that can be perceived by the human eye. Visible light is usually defined as having wavelengths in the range of 400 to 880 terahertz, between the infrared and the ultraviolet. The light particles are called photons. Light's energy is related to its frequencies. Photons have energy and are in constant motion. So light is defined by wavelengths, which is the measure of the distance from one peak or top of a wave of light. What is time? How do we measure it? Time is light and it is measured by light. Time is the indefinite continued progress of existence and events that occur in an apparently irreversible succession from the past, through the present, into the future. It is a component quantity of various measurements used to sequence events, to compare the duration of events or the intervals between them, and to quantify rates of change of quantities in material reality or in the conscious experience. Time is often referred to as a fourth dimension because it exists up to the sixth dimension. Time is not something tangible. It is only an emergent effect of motion. During our lifetime, we are part of an ever-changing sense of time as we go from the past to the future, but as units of time, our lives begin in the future and eventually recede into the past. Neither past or future are physically real, only the present is. Everyone measures his or her own experience in time differently because the speed of light is the same for all observers. In other words, if all observers accept that the speed of light is 186,282 miles per second, then they can't agree on the time it takes for other objects to travel relative to them. This means, someone moving through space-time will experience it differently at various points. This point is referred to as the zero reference point. There are 14 measurements of time. You have 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. You have 60 seconds, which is 1 minute. You have 60 minutes, which is 1 hour. You have 24 hours, which is 1 day. You have 7 days, which is 1 week. You have 28, 29, 30, and 31 days in a month. You have 12 months or 365 days in a year. You have 10 years in a decade. You have 100 years in a century and 1000 years in a millennium. You have a epoch, which is a million years, and you have a eon or eon, which is a billion years. After that comes a teranium, which is 1 trillion years. You also have the rest, which sit in between each second. In relativity, time becomes an integral part of the universe, and cannot exist apart from the universe. The speed of light is invariable and absolute. Both space and time must be flexible and relative to accommodate this. Time dilation, as well as the associated length contraction, which is the process of becoming smaller, is negligible and almost imperceptible at our normal everyday speeds. However, it becomes pronounced as an object's speed begin approaching the speed of light. Time, also known as the time continuum, time continuity, or time frame, is a non-spatial dimension in which events occur in a seemingly irreversible transition from one state to the next as governed by the laws of the local universe. These sequential events form what is known as a timeline. More timelines can be formed, and time travel can result in splits in the timeline. What is speed? Speed can be defined in several ways. It is the rate at which an object covers distance. Speed is the distance traveled by an object divided by the time interval. Speed is the magnitude of an object's velocity. What is the speed of light? Particles of light, photons, travel through a vacuum at a constant pace of 186,282 miles per second. A light year is the distance light travels in a year, which is rounded off to 6 trillion miles. If a spaceship could travel at, say, 99% of the speed of light, a hypothetical observer looking in would see the ship's clock moving about twice as slow as normal, i.e. coordinate time is moving twice as slow as proper time, and the astronauts inside moving around apparently in slow motion. At 99.5% of the speed of light, the observer would see the clock moving about 10 times slower than normal. At 99.9% of the speed of light, the factor becomes about 22 times, at 99.99% 224 times, and at 99.9999% 700 times, increasing exponentially. At the speed of light itself, time completely stops. Even though a spaceship traveling at close to the speed of light may take 100 years to reach a distant star 100 light-years away as observed by people on Earth, the astronauts in the spaceship might hardly age at all as they travel across the galaxy. This characteristic of relativistic time has given rise to a lot of discussion of time travel, which is another issue. There is an easy way to think of this difficult concept. When an object is in motion, its movement shares some of its spatial movement with movement in time as well. In other words, when we move in space, we are moving in time also. In fact, even when we are at rest, we are still moving in time. Therefore, if we can move at relativistic speeds, then time slows down. Consequently, at the speed of light, time stops. What compels this sharing of dimensions is the invariant nature of the speed of light, which is a fundamental constant of the universe that can be exceeded. For all practical purposes, the universe, including us, of course, is moving in time, at the speed of light. Thus, the slowing of time at relativistic speeds occurs, in a sense, to protect the inviolable cosmic speed limit, namely the speed of light. There is a quite complicated relationship between the speed of light and time. When we move in space relative to other objects, part of our motion is spent in slowing time down relative to them. The faster we move, the slower they perceive our time to pass. When objects approach a black hole, they accelerate away from our frame of reference or time. If a galaxy is 1 million light-years away, if we travel to that galaxy at the speed of light, it will take us 1 million years to reach there and will be there in present time. What if we could go there at a speed faster than light? Would we be in the past then? What is mass? Mass is both a property of a physical body and a measure of its resistance to acceleration when a net force is applied. An object's mass also determines the strength of its gravitational attraction to other bodies. The basic SI unit of mass is the kilogram.m. As, in physics, quantitative measure of inertia, a fundamental property of all matter. What is E equals mc squared? Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. In physics, mass, energy equivalence is the relationship between mass and energy in a system's rest frame, where the two values differ only by a constant and the units of measurement. What is velocity? The velocity of an object is the rate of change of its position with respect to a frame of reference, and is a function of time. Velocity is equivalent to a specification of an object's speed and direction of motion. As the velocity of the body increases significantly, comparable to speed of light, the mass of the body also increases. This is the effect of relativity. If we move slower than it, compared to the speed of light, we will be the people who first experienced the time dilation. Time slows down for your frame of reference. If a spaceship approaches to the speed of light, then the time inside the spaceship will flow slower. If the spaceship travels at the speed of light, then the time inside of the spaceship will stop altogether. For the people inside of the spaceship, they will not realize that the time is going slower. The closer that the spaceship approaches to the speed of light, the shorter the spaceship will become. The spaceship will shrink in size. Also, the people traveling inside of the spaceship will notice that the universe is getting shorter and shorter, reducing in size. The speed of light is maximum speed that any subatomic particles can achieve, and in special relativity the relation between speed and time. For example, when a train reaches the speed of light, that is 186,282 m/s, the time for the passenger will stop for an observer who is outside train, therefore the observer will experience more time than the passenger who is traveling in the train. The clock which has been placed in the train will not move at all, whereas a similar clock that is placed outside will be normal. Thus that's time and speed. What is space? Space is the boundless universe of 9 dimensions in which objects and events have relative position and direction. Physical space is often conceived in 3 linear dimensions, although modern physicists usually consider it, with time, to be part of a boundless 5-dimensional continuum known as space-time. The truth is there is no such thing as space, because space is always fill. Space is an expansion of up, down and around. Earth sits in space right now, the moon sits in space right now. You, yourself, sit in space right now. What about the dot? The universe began as a dot, this dot expand to create universes, galaxies, and star systems. When the dot exploded, it created the first plane and dimension. The dot exploding is the Big Bang. The first cycle was a dot in the universe. Then that dot became a line, which is the first dimension, the line became a wall, second dimension, the wall became a square, third dimension, the first dot split like a daughter cell, into 2, the second dot formed the circle, by completing one cycle around to itself, none knows, save itself, where the circle begins and ends. Then it began to spin, to form an orb, and thus 360 degrees of square and 360 degrees of circle is born. The circle was turned inside out and placed within the confines of the square. This was accomplished by first dividing the circle into 4 parts, geometry was created, and dimensions were formed, measure was in effect. What was the Big Bang? The Big Bang is the leading explanation about how the universe began. At its simplest, it says the universe as we know it started with a small singularity, then inflated over the next 76 trillion years to the cosmos that we know today. In the first second after the universe began, the surrounding temperature was about 10 billion degrees Fahrenheit. The cosmos contained a vast array of fundamental particles such as neutrons, electrons, and protons. These decayed or combined as the universe got cooler. What is a dimension? A measurable extent of some kind, such as length, width, height, and volume. The dimension of a mathematical space is informally defined as the minimum number of coordinates needed to specify any point within it. Thus a line has a dimension of 1 because only one coordinate is needed to specify a point on it. In physics it can also mean any physical measurement such as length, time, mass, etc. We can think of our waking reality and our dreaming reality as examples of 2 different dimensions that pretty much all humans experience. In fact, there are different dimensions, each of which has different rules about what can and cannot be done. How many dimensions are there? There are 9 dimensions, some people say 12 because they don't understand that the dimensions loop 9 times, giving you 81, which is 8 and 1, which is 9. There are only 9 dimensions, and each of these dimensions exist on a sound key frequency. The first dimension goes from a dot to a line connecting any 2 points. It has no width or depth, only length. The first dimension is vibrating on 0 to 16.6 Hz or 0 to 1000 watts. A good description of a one-dimensional object is a straight line, which exists only in terms of length and has no other discernible qualities. The first dimension, as already noted, is that which gives it length, aka the x-axis, and x marks the spot. This is where the plane of force begins. The microverse begins on the first looping from the top of the 9th dimension. The second dimension has both length and width. Imagine a world that only has 2 dimensions. We created the second dimension when we draw a second line that branches off from or crosses the first. It's vibrating on 16.6 Hz to 16.6 kHz or 1 to 1000 kilowatts. The third dimension is the one in which you live. The third dimension makes up the realm of Nazut. A three-dimensional object has length, width, and height. The third dimension is what we go through to get from one point to another in the second dimension. It is vibrating on 16.6 kHz to 16.6 MHz or 1 to 1000 megawatts. Add to it a second dimension, the y-axis, or height, and you get an object that becomes a second-dimensional shape, like a square. Third-dimensional height, which means the measurement from base to top or, of a standing person, from head to foot. The third dimension involves depth, the z-axis, and gives all objects a sense of area and a cross-section. The first three dimensions make up the physical plane and the plane of force. The fourth dimension is height, width, length, and volume. The fourth is the dream state, which is the mental plane. You go to the mental plane when you think, when you dream. When you are asleep and dreaming, you are in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is the subconscious. It is what they call subspace. Subspace, occasionally spelled subspace, is an integral part of the universe, distinct from yet coexistence with normal space and its respective space-time continuum. Subspace has an infinite number of domains. Subspace and normal space sometimes connect together, that which fills space density. What is density? The density of a substance is its mass per unit volume. So you see, there is no such thing as space because there is always volume. Scientists believe that the fourth dimension is time and space. Time in the fourth dimension gets bigger. Time also exists on the first and second, but once you go to the fourth dimension, time slows down. 5 minutes in the third is 1 hour in the fourth. In the fifth, 1 day could be 1,000 years. This dimension is where the spiritual plane and mental plane starts. The fourth dimension vibrates from 16.6 MHz to 16.6 GHz or 1 to 1000 gigawatts. The perfect example of this is a cube, which exists in 4 dimensions and has a length, width, depth, and volume. Beyond these 4 lie the fifth dimension, which is not immediately apparent to us, but we can still perceive it as having a direct effect on the universe and reality as we know it, which governs the properties of all known matter at any given point. Along with the 3 other dimensions, knowing an object's position in time is essential to plotting its position in the universe. In the dreams we remember, for example, space, time, and objects exist, but are less fixed and can, to some extent, be created or manipulated at will. However, fear and anxiety are also present, and so much so that the lower fourth dimension is the source of our religious images of hell. The fourth dimension is extremely diverse because thought forms only require thought to be created. For Earth humans, the astral body is our fourth dimensional self. It is also referred to as the energy body, the light body, the emotional body, the etheric body, and the Merkaba body, your starship, although each of these can have slightly different descriptions in different teachings. This body is said by some to be slightly larger than the physical body, extending 2 to 6 inches from our skin. It holds expressions of our personality, including thoughts, desires, likes and dislikes, beliefs, and our inner child. It is also described as the body we have before we are born and after our physical body dies. Dreams, including daydreaming, are a portal between the third and fourth dimensions. In dreams you are astral body. The astral body, as it is called by many philosophers, intermediate between the intelligent soul and the mental body, composed of a submaterial. What is astral projection? Or astral travel, is a term used in esotericism to describe an intentional out-of-body experience that assumes the existence of a soul or consciousness called an astral body that is separate from the physical body and capable of traveling outside it throughout the universe. There are different types of dreams, visions, fortune or thing about the future, and trash or waste dreams. Waste dreams are dreams, thoughts the mind is trying to get rid of. This is in line with associations drawn between the fourth dimension and the heart chakra, air element. In the chakra model, humankind is currently in the process of shifting its focus from the third to the fourth chakra and some to the fifth chakra.